This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the Facto Leaders podcast on the B Podcast Network, where I share up-to-date, evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help pediatric therapists, educators, and aspiring school leaders design services that support social, emotional, and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood. Whether you want to learn effective strategies for your therapy session or classroom, be an influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, this is Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 179 of the De Facto Leaders podcast on the B Podcast Network. This is the fourth episode in the National Literacy Month Reading is Fundamental campaign. In this series, we are partnering with Reading is Fundamental as part of an effort done by the B Podcast Network, where we are publishing episodes that provide information about supporting literacy. Reading is Fundamental is a nonprofit that focuses on connecting educators and families with materials and training aligned with evidence-based literacy instruction, and also offers unique book ownership solutions for professionals and families to address book equity issues. Check the show notes to learn more about Reading is Fundamental, and also check the show notes to learn more about the other B Podcast Network shows. In this episode, we are talking about increasing book equity and fostering a love of reading. How can school leaders make informed decisions about reading curriculum when they know the home environments among their student body vary widely? I don't envy people tasked with these kinds of decisions. My opinion is that schools should ensure students get their instructional needs met during the school day because it's difficult to control what happens to students once they leave the school campus. Direct instruction of reading has to fall on the plate of educators. If we assume certain practices will be carried out at home consistently, we create huge equity issues. With all that being said, school staff can work to create a shared partnership with families and communities. Even though they might aim to include the essentials during the school day, they can provide opportunities and tools for families to support literacy outside formal classroom instruction. I invited Susan Brady, a reading specialist from Illinois, to this episode to discuss how she's helped her community get access to books and extracurricular activities that support literacy. Susan Brady has been in the teaching profession for over 40 years. She worked in a private school where she taught first grade and kindergarten. 16 years ago, she began work in the public schools as a kindergarten teacher. In 2008, she received a master's degree in reading from Governor State University and became a reading specialist. She moved to middle school 5 years ago and works with small groups, large groups, and push-ins. She also has started and run engaging book clubs for her students to help get them excited about reading. In this conversation, we discuss: are reading teachers getting pre-service training they need to critically evaluate research and implement instructional practices? Relying on a curriculum versus leveraging a curriculum to guide your practice. How to start a book club and get students excited about reading, where to find inexpensive or free books for schools and families, and navigating logistical and equity issues when hosting community events and running extracurriculars. Don't forget to check out the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers develop a strategic plan for putting executive functioning support in place in collaboration with their school teams, as well as Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, my program that helps SLPs create a system for language therapy. You can get 25% off of either program when you join between September 15th and October 15th as part of this special National Literacy Month campaign. All you need to do to get that special rate on either program is enter coupon code RIF25 on the checkout page. You can learn more about the School of Clinical Leadership at drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership, and you can learn more about Language Therapy Advanced Foundations at drkarenspeech.com/language therapy. Please remember to check the show notes for all of the links that Susan shares. She shares some great resources for places you can go to improve book distribution and get access to free or inexpensive books for your own classroom or therapy room or to provide to families. Now, please enjoy this interview with Susan Brady. Today, I am joined by Sue Brady, a reading specialist from Illinois. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
I'm really happy to be here, Karen. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk with you. I know you've got some great work that you're doing. So I thought we'd start off by having you just telling us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, tell us about your background and what you do now.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I started out 43 years ago as a first grade teacher, became a kindergarten teacher, and this was all actually in the private school that I actually went to years ago. And then I joined the public school I am at now, and this is my 31st year there. And I started out as a kindergarten teacher there, got my master's degree in reading from Governor State in Illinois, and I've been the reading specialist ever since. I've worked from, oh my goodness, with the kindergarten up all the way to eighth graders. And I also taught at Governor State in their Masters for Reading program for a while. And I am also a consultant for the Bureau of Education and Research out of Washington. I've traveled to 23 states doing workshops in the area of reading for them. So that's basically 43 years in a nutshell.
Yeah, wow. I would love to hear about how you got involved with the research side, with the Bureau of Education
Oh,
Research. Yeah.
well, what happened with that? That's the name of their company. And I kind of accidentally got involved with them because I had been attending a kindergarten conference, and the original session I signed up for, I decided not to go to that one. So I snuck into another one. And I happened to sit next to a man who worked for the Bureau of Education and Research. And
Hmm.
then I emailed him later, and he invited me to do a tryout session with them, and it just worked out. And ever since then I've been working for them, and that involves just keeping up with current trends in education. So I belong to various journals and listen to podcasts and follow different blogs and things, but the main thing is just keeping up with what's current. And it was really nice because traveling the country, I got to talk to so many different teachers and see what was happening in different parts of the country, and I enjoyed that part of it immensely. So
Yeah, I imagine that's really interesting to see what's happening in different states. I know that
mhm,
as I've gotten more involved, really since 2015, since I've been offering programs online and podcasting and talking to
mhm,
people from all different areas, I think that at first you kind of, and this happens too with teaching even or therapy even in the same building when you're a therapist or a teacher working with groups of students or an individual
mhm.
student, you think everybody kind of does things the way that you do. And then
Yes.
when you maybe move to a different role in your building and you see what everybody does, you realize, wow, there's a lot of variability. And then that's even more when you go and start talking to people from different schools in different states, and you realize that, I mean, every state has their own guidelines and it's very different as far as what is happening in many
Yeah.
places. And a lot of things are the same, but so I'm curious with like, because what I've noticed sometimes as far as the pre-service training for teachers, specifically in reading, that's something I think a lot about. And there's all kinds of conversations going on now about, our teacher preparation programs, especially in reading, are they teaching up-to-date current evidence-based practices for how kids learn to read? And I know that in many places, people end up teaching, even reading specialists end up feeling like they're not prepared, or they're teaching methods that don't necessarily haven't necessarily been shown to be effective. So I'm curious what your experience has been with being so involved, you having access to all this research and mentoring teachers, like, do you
Mhm.
think it's getting better? What was that like when you compare your programs that you took versus what you learned after when you're out in the field and had different roles and got the chance to read different literature?
It's really interesting because, they always say the pendulum swings
Yeah.
back and forth and back and forth. And I remember when whole language was a big thing. I
Yeah.
don't know if you
Uh-huh.
remember the
Yeah,
whole
that's kind
language.
of where I was going.
It was
Yeah.
like, God, I bought into whole language like you wouldn't believe. And then it was, no, 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 they're not learning. Now we have to go back to phonic. It just, to me, we need to be consistent. We need to find something and just stay with it. I was always under, at least for me, I always thought if we have a curriculum, it's there to guide you, but
Hmm.
you have to know what the research says and and then do what you're comfortable with. Some people really, excuse me, some people really need a curriculum to follow.
Hmm.
Me,
Yeah.
excuse me, personally, I use it as a guide, but I always like to go off on tangents because every child does not learn the same way. And you have to know how children learn. And I totally agree with what you said that it's, I honestly don't think people are prepared once they get in that classroom
Hmm.
because I don't want to say it's cookie cutter, but when you take these classes, they tell you one thing, but then you get into that classroom and boy, is it different because you don't know what to expect. Like when I moved to the middle school, I was so used to working with children from K through 4. And all of a sudden, I've got these older kids, and I was like, oh my goodness. But it was funny because I was doing a lot of the same things I did with the elementary kids, just at their level.
Hmm.
So you've got to get in there. And you can, here's another thing, you can't be afraid to ask for help. Go to your reading specialist, go to your SLPs and ask them for advice because that's what we're there for. At least that's what
Hmm.
I think. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that with, well, as an SLP, I always was excited when people asked me for help
yes.
relating to reading, relating to
Mhm.
something other than the R sound. Not that I don't appreciate the referrals for articulation as well, but it
Right.
was great when people started to understand that I could be a resource for that as well.
Hmm.
And um, yeah, I mean, there's so many different tangents we could go there, but I think one of the conversations that I have been having in this interview as part of the National Literacy Month series, where we're partnering with Reading is Fundamental, and I know you're familiar with that program. And so I
Yes.
am going to be talking a lot about the specific components of effective instruction, which I think we'd both agree that all of that is very important. But then there's this
Hmm.
other factor of, yes, we have to have that good quality instruction in place. Teachers need to feel prepared and equipped to understand what are the skills that kids need in order to be strong readers and word decoders. But then there's this whole, almost the environmental piece and
Hmm.
it's almost like a culture of reading. And I know that you've done a lot of work with doing different programs that give kids access to books. And I don't think we can really ignore that piece, because even if you have really effective instruction, regardless of the grade level, if kids don't have access to books, it is going to have a significant impact. So I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on how can we create that almost almost what I would refer to as a culture of reading, and or what people would say fostering a love of reading, because I think that that's what whole language tried to get at, but it didn't quite work,
Hmm.
because yes, we do need that structured component, and you also need those other things where we're giving kids exposure to quality literature and making it interesting for them. So yeah, I guess how do you think about that? And then we can start talking about some specific initiatives that you've been a part of.
Okay. I totally agree again with what you said. And reading starts in the home because by the time they get to us as early childhood, 4 year olds, 5 year olds, hopefully they would have a love of books. But if not, we have to try to instill that in them. When I was a kindergarten teacher, I had books everywhere in my classroom, just everywhere, in the block area, in the kitchen area, the little library. We did read alouds constantly, and I always tried to show them how much fun books could be. And go get a library card. Tell them, let's go get a library card. Take field trips to the library, things like that. You have to show them that books are fun, because nowadays when they come in, they think their phones are fun. They
Mm-hmm.
think screen time is fun.
Yeah.
And when parents say to me, how can I get my child to love books? I say the easiest thing is to do read alouds to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if, do the different voices and things like that. And just the background knowledge that read alouds give to children is amazing. It can take them all over the world. I have to share this funny story. I was doing a read aloud of a book with fourth graders years ago. And there's a part in there where a bully in the neighborhood goes and he takes a knife and he carves into a tree and destroys the bark of the tree. And I had a number of fourth graders who didn't know what bark was.
Mm.
And it amazed me.
Yeah.
So we had a dead tree in the backyard, and I went and pulled bark off of it, and I brought bark to them, and they were so excited. They wanted to take pieces of it home. It's little things like that. I just assumed everybody knew what bark was, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't. So you have to build that background knowledge for the kids too. And reading does that. It just opens so many doors.
The thing I like about read alouds is that it's accessible if you have if you have access to books,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to create the space for, again, like being able to sit with your kid or kids and
Mm-hmm.
read with them. Once you create the space to do that, read alouds become a very accessible strategy that you can do. And I think that one of the challenges or debates is, all right, what are schools responsible for? What are parents responsible for? And I
Mm-hmm.
think most people would agree that it is a shared responsibility. But when you're thinking about curriculum, if you are in a leadership position in the schools, you almost have to make your plans with the assumption that kids are not going to be doing anything outside of school, because you know that
Right.
some kids are, like, everybody's experience out of school is very different. So you almost can't put your money on, well, I think that this is going to be happening outside of school, because you can never guarantee that. And so you want to make sure that you provide this a complete of a package as possible
Mm-hmm.
at school. But I get parents all the time that are like they're willing and able and they want to do something outside of school, and they say, like, what should I do with my kids? And I just, a lot of the training that I have for clinicians, while I welcome anybody to join, if they're a parent who's homeschooling their child, or if they're just like a parent who wants to learn more, I'm like, yeah, sure, come and join us. But I also know that you need to make things as simple as possible so that they can be
Right.
accessible. And read alouds from that standpoint are probably one of the most accessible things from a standpoint of almost like implementation fidelity. Like, if I'm going to give a parent, like, here's your morphological awareness and you got to go into all these linguistic skills. I mean, and yes, anybody can learn how to do that. A lot of parents educate themselves and are able to do that, but it is a little bit more intimidating. Whereas read alouds, it's like you have 10 minutes to sit down on a bench in a park, you can do a read aloud. It's a
Exactly.
lot more accessible, like I said,
Right.
and it's something that we can do across settings so that teachers can show parents how to do it. SLPs can show teachers how to do it if they want to make it more robust, or reading specialists can train content area specialists to do it. So,
Right.
not that, again, a lot of the people who are in the schools would have the tools to do it already, but maybe they want to make it more robust from working with their colleagues. So,
Right. And then that made me think that when I'm at the store or whenever I'm
mhm.
out places, I see so many little children in carts on phones, but they're playing games when there are so many online stories they could be reading to or
Yeah.
listening to. I mean, they could go to Storyline Online. They could go to Reading Rainbow. They could go to Epic. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and let them listen to a book instead of playing the games.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Yeah,
could
I
just,
that's kind of where I go with that, where people are like, what the question of what apps can I learn to, or what apps can I download to help my kids build language skills?
yes,
And I'm like,
yes.
well, it's probably not going to come with an app, but if you are going to use something that is technology based, listening to a story is
Mhm.
is the best option if you are going to use a device. Now, of course, wouldn't it be even better if you did a read aloud at home and now you're looking for things in the grocery store that you could use to pair to what you read about? That would be amazing, which would be an even more ideal situation. But I understand that sometimes you do, um, yeah, like you can't do that all the time, even though
Right.
that would be a great scenario.
But that
So,
reminds me of a story. I once I was at the grocery store and there was this man. He had his little daughter in the cart, and I wanted to know if he was an SLP because I was probably stalking this poor man because I saw him in the produce department and he picked up an orange and he held it out to his daughter and he says, "Sweetie, look at this. It's round. What color is it? It's orange. When we get home later, we're going to cut it up and it's going to have sections in it." And I just thought, this man is amazing. He did a whole lesson to his daughter about colors and shapes in the produce department. And I
hmm
just thought that how simple, but the vocabulary he was teaching her just amazed me.
hmm I think that's what we can go back to is that things can be simple.
Yes,
You can teach language and vocabulary with things that are just there, like use what you have.
right.
So, what when I know that we wanted to talk about the topic of again making things accessible to as many people as possible. So yes, there are many things even at the grocery store that you can use to build language skills and things that are going to support reading and literacy. But what kind of I know you've been involved with a lot of programs just at your in at the community level with book clubs and book equity and being able to get resources into the hands of people and doing enriching activities. So, kind of on that topic of, okay, we've got our good quality instruction in place, and now we want to create what I like to refer to as kind of the ecosystem
Mhm.
of literacy. So, what kinds of things have you been involved with?
Like you mentioned, I have my book club at school, and I just, those are my students who just love books. We do read alouds together. They help me set up the Scholastic Book Fair for the eighth grade teacher every year. They are the ones who help me with my reading is fundamental books. They help me pick out the reading is fundamental books, which I learned the hard way. What I like
Mm-hmm.
isn't always what the students like.
Yeah.
So I scroll through all the choices and then they're like, Mrs. Brady, those are good ones. Order those. And so they're very helpful in that way. And I love when they help me because it's always like, do we get first pick of the book? And I go, of course you do, because you're here for me. We work
Mm-hmm.
with our library to help, maybe decorate the library or clean up the library, whatever it needs. But I think one great resource is your local library.
Mm-hmm.
They are there for you. Get to know them, especially down in youth services. Our youth service library head, Beth, is amazing. And we're going to take a field trip there this year. They recently redid the whole library and the youth services department, and they're going to get a tour of it, what they can do. They can do podcasts from our library. They
Oh,
can make
wow.
video. I mean, they really amped up this library. It's just amazing what they can do. But kids don't know that. They don't know what's there.
Mm-hmm.
We also have somebody from the library who would come and read to our elementary students. And we were supposed to have somebody for the middle school this year, but she recently got a different job. So they are hopefully hiring someone to replace her. But she's going to come in and maybe do battle of the books with the kids just to get them excited about books.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to know what's out in your community, like you were saying. We also had recently a African American market open up in our city. And so I told our social studies teacher about that. And she thought maybe a field trip there, maybe have the owner come and talk
Mm.
to the kids about what's there and what's available. And it was funny this morning because I check our local paper every morning. Just this morning, we have this place called Fox Point, which is just the little like center of town place.
Mhm.
They are holding the very first ever cultural evening. And I think it was August from, I forgot when it started, but it's till 8:30 at night, where all these different dancers, activities, food is going to be offered for our city. So you've got to know what's out there and
Mhm.
take advantage of it. We hold literacy nights every year. Last year we did a literacy luau where we had Hawaiian dancers come and teach the kids about the Hawaiian culture. And we got up there and we did the hula at the end. It was really, really fun. And just, oh, one of our most successful ones was called Men in Books. That was back when Men in Black was the big thing.
Mhm.
So we had a literacy night and only men could come with with their children. It could be brothers, cousins, fathers, grandpas, and just to see the amount of men that came. And then the people who we had reading books to the students that night were the police chief, firemen came, the mayor came. We had football players from our local high school. They came and read books to the kids. It was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. So with your book club, is this something that you do that's it's not it's like a club that's not part of the standard curriculum. It's an extracurricular activity.
Yes, it is. It's something that I started 2 years ago. This will be my third year, and it's either before school or after school. These kids are so into books. They just love to come bring their breakfast into my classroom and
Hmm.
talk about books. And so we do. Last
How,
year, they,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, last year they became obsessed with nursery rhymes. I don't remember why, but they wanted to look into the beginnings of nursery rhymes. And we found out how disturbing they were.
Hmm.
Really,
Yeah, that is interesting how that happens.
especially the Muffin Man really threw them for a loop. How the origin of that story. Do you know that one?
I don't know the Muffin Man as well, but I can think of a couple that are a little more disturbing, or when you listen to it, you think that didn't age well. Like The
Right,
Princess and
right.
the Pea, Hansel and Gretel, or
Mhm.
like some of those stories that are or even Goldilocks, you know,
Yes,
breaking and entering into someone's
right.
house.
But it got them interested and they just kept researching and they're like, Mrs. Brady, did you know this one? And it was just fun. We had a fun time. So
Hmm.
I feed off of them because I would have never thought, let's research nursery rhymes and, see where this takes us. But that's
Hmm.
what they wanted and they learned a lot about it. So, yeah.
Hmm.
So, like I said, we either meet before school or after school. And was it 2 years ago? There was a new book that was all called Hummingbird about a little girl named Olive who had a bone disease and she was in a wheelchair. But the theme was you can do anything. Who cares if you're in a wheelchair? And I had two eighth grade boys in tears when we were reading it. I mean, they were literally getting choked up. That's what I want. That's the reaction I want from them.
Hmm.
So they were like, Mrs. Bray, that's the best book we've ever read. So,
How do you go about starting something like that? I mean, I imagine it varies at every school, whatever the
mhm.
process is.
Well, my school, you have to like write a little synopsis of what it's going to be about, and you get it approved by administration. And then I just advertise. You put up
Hmm.
flyers around the school. Do you love books? If you love books, if you're a bookaholic, meet Mrs. Brady for an initial meeting. And we met one day after school, and I gave them the guidelines. And I said, if you want to do this, come on and join. So I've had kids all the way from fifth through eighth grade join the reading club. And I just told them my only thing is you have to be there because you can't miss part of a read aloud.
Hmm.
But it's just, anyone who loves books is welcome.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
basically it. And I forgot to mention before that when we do our flyers or anything we do for our school, we always have them translated into all the languages of our students.
Hmm. I'm going to take a quick break here to talk about the School of Clinical Leadership and Language Therapy Advanced Foundations. As you're listening to the conversation, you're probably starting to realize how important it is for professionals to work on building their own skill sets for how they work directly with students, as well as understanding how systems work and putting strategic plans in place for working with the whole team. Because you can make a big impact with direct intervention, but you can make an even bigger impact if you take it a step further and also think about leadership and advocacy. So I help you do both things in the School of Clinical Leadership and Language Therapy Advanced Foundations. In Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, I help SLPs and other professionals working on language create a system for language therapy so they can walk into sessions confident that they're giving kids the skills that they need to succeed and that they're building those foundational language skills that support high-level comprehension and literacy. To learn more about that program, you can go to drkarenspeech.com/language therapy. Now, many of my Language Therapy Advanced Foundation students, once they start to get confident in their protocol, realize that they need to be collaborating with their teams. So that's really the next step. And many of them realize that they should be working on executive functioning as well. Now, there's plenty of executive functioning work embedded into Language Therapy Advanced Foundations because work on metacognition is so important to effective language intervention. But we also have to think about what the entire team is doing because students need support when they leave your room. And part of that is ensuring the right scaffolding is in place across the environments that students are in. And when we think about executive functioning, we have to think about more than just literacy and academics. We also have to think about how students self-regulate, how they interact socially, and how they handle those unstructured situations during their school day, as well as outside of their school day. And you need a framework for navigating all of that because now, once we move beyond thinking about direct intervention, we're thinking about multiple service delivery models. And you need a framework for making that happen. I help you do that in the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers develop a plan for putting executive functioning support in place in collaboration with their school teams. You can learn more about the School of Clinical Leadership at drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. As part of the Reading is Fundamental series, you can get 25% off either program, or actually both programs if you wanted to join both, between September 15th and October 15th. Just enter coupon code RIF25 on the checkout page when you're signing up to get this special rate. Yeah, so I'm with it being before and after school, I'm just thinking of students who may have transportation issues. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's always a good thing if you can work it out where it's something they can almost blend into their school day, especially if they take the bus. So
Mm-hmm.
has that ever come up for some of the students that maybe wanted to participate?
It has come up, and of course, some kids are late sometimes, but I haven't had to wait with a child more than maybe 15 minutes after school. But I know transportation can be an issue. That's why I actually like the early morning ones because I know the bus kids are there and then we
Mm-hmm.
can meet in my room. So it is more convenient. So
Mm-hmm.
I know years, this is going back many, many, many years. We had a reading club at the elementary building. It was called Reading Rascals, and it was after school. And what the premise was, we had a lot of money in our budget at the time. So let's say there were 10 kids in Reading Rascals. We had the funds to buy every child a copy of the book,
Oh,
and we would
great.
read it and discuss it. But basically, it kind of turned into a babysitting service at the end of the day, and we were waiting. One child we waited over an hour for, and it just became a habit. So unfortunately, our administration said we can't have that, and they disbanded the club. So
Mm-hmm.
but with the older kids, I think there's an advantage where so many of them live close, they can just walk home too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of the morning club
Mm-hmm.
where I know that sometimes students will, if they take the bus to school and they're already usually utilizing the transportation that's available and they're there already,
Right.
it's a nice opportunity to make it accessible to more students. And then of course you can have the after school option as well, but you have if you have both, or if you have a flexible option, then that allows more students to participate if
Right.
they're not able to have a parent come pick them up. Or because I obviously understand with schools where they have staff that they have a contract and they can't be there after a
Mhm.
certain length of time, and so they've got to be respectful of that as well. But then also, it's always nice if you can make it work when students are already planning on being there. So,
Exactly. Exactly. And so many of our kids at the junior high level get involved in so many things.
mm-hmm,
I mean, because we have the drama club, we have student
mm-hmm.
council, we just have so many options for them. So they have to be able to plan their schedules too. That's why I like to offer morning and afternoon.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point. If with students who are in a lot of sports clubs, or if just, organized sports relating to the school or travel or whatever they're doing, a lot of times
right.
that is after school. I know that some of them do mornings too, but that way
Hmm.
they can work it around their schedule. So
Right.
aside from the clubs, one of the other things to consider is book distribution. I spoke with a previous guest who at the school, they were working on the school library and they were wanting kids to have access to books, but they had to tell some of the students, just because you'd give a student a book to take home and then it wouldn't come back, and then the library was having a difficult time having a good supply of books because they
Mhm.
couldn't keep track of things. But then the problem that, if they're telling students, well, you've got to keep your books at school, then they don't have access to the books at home. But
Right.
at the same time, they were having some issues with resources when they didn't keep the books in the school. So
Mhm.
I know that you have done a lot of research with book distribution and making sure that people have access to books, whether it be schools or whether it be families, or
Mhm.
even just having enough that you could make sure that students have something that they could take home. So
Mhm.
what research have you done, and what have you been able to find as far as helping with book distribution?
Well, the biggest thing I have right now, which is the reading is fundamental. I'm on
Mm-hmm.
the third and supposedly final year of the grant. I'm always keeping my fingers crossed it will continue. But that gives the kids the opportunities to take three books home to keep forever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's excellent. I
Mm-hmm.
also I found just last night when I was online, because I'm always online, I found something called Better World Books, which I have never heard of before, but you just request books, and
Mm-hmm.
it let me request. It said, what kind do you like? And I said, I like chapter books, I like graphic novels. And they emailed me right back and they said, thank you for your request. We are looking into it. And if we have those available, we will send them to you. They asked how many I wanted, and I said, as many as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'd never heard of that place before. So there are always new things popping up. So I mean, I just typed in free books and that's what popped up. So besides the reading is fundamental, I'm trying that one called Better World Books. And I don't know if you've heard of this. I just found this one. Have you heard of Bookshare?
That
It's a
sounds familiar.
website. This I don't. I sent it to my special ed department because it says it's free or a nominal joining fee. And it says it's for students with disabilities. They have audiobooks, they have Braille, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how they do that, but it just says it's a transformative website that is very popular. So I just recently heard about that. Now, I know, like I said, I am in really tight with our youth services department. I think teachers don't be afraid to go ask for free things,
Mm-hmm.
because just 3 weeks ago, the youth services woman texted me and she said, Sue, I just weeded out our library shelves. I know you need books. You get first crack. Come on over. I left with, I don't even know how many bags of books that I took for free because they can't keep them all.
Mm-hmm.
They have to get rid of them eventually. So now I've got some nice new books updated for our school library or for my own personal library at school for the kids. Just ask for free stuff. Also, I'm sure your city must have those little free libraries around.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've
Yes,
got some in my neighborhood.
there you go. I know we have one by our fire department. We have some by our park, and there's one down our main street in Lansing. But if you go to freelittlelibrary.org, it and you type in your city, it will show you where they are, and they're free. You can just go take them. So
Mm-hmm.
there's
Do you
just so
know where like what's the geographic area where that is? Obviously we're both in Illinois, but I imagine
well,
there's something like that in other states as well.
it had the whole map of the United States.
Oh,
So
okay.
you just had to put in your zip code and it would
Mm-hmm.
take you to your city, which
Oh,
I thought was
cool.
so amazing. So
Well, yeah, I mean, I have been there's one that's on the route that where I take a walk and
mhm,
I've grabbed books from there when it's like, oh, here's the library. That one looks good. Let me take that. So,
yes,
yeah, I mean, if you're just going for a walk, you can find a book.
right. And I don't, it's funny because I don't know if people don't realize they are free. Just
Mm,
you can just have those. So yeah, and I always weed out my own books, towards the end of the year. And let say, kids, if you want a book, come take one. And I know a lot of people might not feel this way, but I do. Like if a child really, really, really loves a book and they keep forgetting to bring it back, or I know they don't have a book at home and they just like Mrs. Brady, and I just the book is theirs. I'm not going to keep bugging them for it. But that's
hmm
just me because I want kids to have books.
hmm hmm
No.
The other thing that I've done, and this is just for myself, is that libraries will have book sales.
Yes.
I know when they are in my town, and you could just go and they take all their books that they're wanting to get rid of or that they're wanting to sell, and you can get books for. I mean, I've left with big boxes of books for
Mhm.
you end up spending maybe $5. So some of the books are a couple dollars to 50 cents. So they're not, they're wanting to sell the books. Sometimes they have some that are free. Now,
Mhm.
with that, some of the books are not in the best shape, but there's a lot of options. So you can go there and you can look. And I found some pretty good things at those book sales when it's essentially kind of like a garage sale, but at the library. So
Yeah.
that's
And
another option.
speaking of that, our library does that all the time. And the way our library does it, when you go in, you get a bag, and I think you pay $5 for the bag. And then you just go in and
Oh
fill the
yeah.
bag up.
I've
So
heard of that one too.
you can do that. But that made me think of have you heard of the company called First Book?
First book.
First book, you have to join and you have to qualify. Your school has to be Title I or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And you can, if you don't know all the research, you can get it off your school report card online
Mm-hmm.
because you have to know like lunch counts and things like that. But the best, they have great books that are super inexpensive. I mean, and they're up to date books, where
Mm-hmm.
a $12 book might only be $3. But the best part of First Book that I found, it's the section called Book Bank,
Mm-hmm.
because places donate cartons of books absolutely free. You just have to pay the shipping,
Mm.
and that's it. And if your school will pay the shipping, or it's nominal, maybe $10, but you can get cartons of hardcover books, and it's amazing. And I also found out someone at school told me that you can go on Facebook. I'm not a Facebook person,
Mm-hmm.
but and just say who has free books, and you can get free stuff off of Facebook. So I thought that was also an amazing thing you could do.
There are
So,
some groups for materials share or where you can
mhm,
post materials that you're selling or giving away. So that
mhm,
is an option as well. I think part of this is I know that therapists always are wanting materials, teachers are always wanting to have a good, yeah, a good repertoire of strategies and materials at their disposal. And books can just be, if you have a good strategy, especially if you're doing something like read alouds and then you have other facilitation techniques that you're doing, books can be what you use. And then that's easy to potentially send home with students. And with the accessibility piece and with the book distribution aspect, or even just for making sure that people have books at their disposal, it's a lot of times people just aren't aware of what's the process and what are the resources that they can use.
Mhm.
And I think as educators, we can be some of those people that maybe help the families to access or educate them on here's where you can go to get resources, or even be a part of that facilitation process. Like you said, maybe the school can pay the shipping, but they don't have to pay the materials. But now you
Right.
have the materials that you can provide to the families. So it can be a partnership there where you're both figuring out how to distribute the resources and get it into the hands of as many people as possible.
And I forgot to mention that at our literacy nights, we always have the local libraries come and they
Mm,
have tables set up. And when we take our field trip there this year, they are going to allow the students to be able to get library cards if they
mm,
live in the city, because our school district actually has two different cities into it that feed
mhm,
in. But if you're a Lansing resident, you'll be able to get your library card that day, which I think will be really amazing. And in the past, you just made me think we have offered parent workshops.
mhm,
And I always talk about the library at those workshops.
mhm,
And we've also, simple thing that we've done that I forgot to mention, we've emailed parents and just say, if you've got books at home that you don't want anymore, send them in. And we
mhm,
get a lot because you don't realize the libraries you build up at home when you have kids. And all of a sudden
mhm,
you're like, what am I going to do with all these books? So we say, if you don't want your books, send them to us. We can use them.
mhm,
So yeah, it's out there. You just have to, like I said earlier, don't be afraid to ask for free things.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Mm,
and I think the other part is asking for free things for yourself and asking for free things to distribute to other people. Like when you do both of those things, it can be really helpful.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
before we wrap up, I know
Uh-huh.
that we've been talking a lot about book distribution. We talked about the strategies at the very beginning. But do you have any other thoughts or just suggestions that we haven't covered so far today?
Let's see. I do want to mention, just because I'm looking at my notes here, another website that I wanted people to be aware of, because if you don't know this one, it's called Unite for Literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more for the younger students, but it does go up to a little bit older. But it can be translated into over 25 languages, which I think is a great thing that more websites are doing nowadays, that you can have all this access to the different languages. And again, I just want to talk about knowing your community, because it's so
Mm-hmm.
important to know your resources that are out there. I've learned so much just from, like I said, driving down the street and seeing the new African market that opened up and reading the newspaper this morning. Know what's out there, because there's just so many great things out there. Um, I don't know. I think, oh no, I know. One more thing I wanted to talk about was our fabulous um, language department, our EL department. They
Oh, okay.
also hold cultural nights every year. They have done a Cinco de Mayo night. Last year, they also did a Hispanic night, which was more teacher driven, where they came up with the activities, almost like a literacy night before the Hispanic families. It was extremely well attended. But last year, it just blossomed from the idea of a parent was a Nigerian night where the parents kind of took over, used the school space, had dancers come in, cooked for the families, and it was just a tremendous event. And you just learned so much from each other. So that was just from parents,
Mm-hmm.
and it was awesome. So you don't know, but the thing is, you've got to build relationships with your kids and your families,
Mm-hmm.
and then you find out what they are going to do for you, what you can do for them, what they can offer you, because there's just so much out there. And you just gotta talk and
Hmm.
find out. Um,
What recommendations would you have for engaging the families, especially when I know that if you've not had a good experience at school, then maybe
mhm,
you're not maybe you don't feel comfortable spending a lot of time at your child's school, or maybe you're a little hesitant to engage with some of the staff. And, I think that if you're working in a school and you had a great experience and you're going to, when you were in school yourself, it can be tricky to figure out how do I engage with someone who hasn't had that same positive experience that I've had. So, what suggestions do you have for people for engaging families who maybe might be hesitant to come to school events, or maybe they're not participating and you're not really sure why, you're not really sure what's going on.
mhm. Well, personally, with the small groups that I work with, I always start out the beginning of the year with a positive phone call because I'm sure you know that so many parents only get the phone calls like, your child did
Hmm.
this, or,
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So I'll call and introduce myself, say I'm the reading specialist, I'm going to have a great year. This is why they're coming to me. Is there any concern that you have? To
Hmm.
try to start it out on a positive note. And I also use the social worker and say, like, do you know anything about this family? Like,
Hmm.
because they're also a wealth of information. But use the people in your building to try to find out as much as you can. And I'm not saying you're going to be successful with every single parent or family, but we try our hardest that way. But I always think, keep it positive and
Hmm.
send the flyers home and say to the child, do you want to come to this? Let's see if we can get you in here. And that made me think of when we were talking about transportation earlier in the conversation, getting picked up late or whatever. So many of our kids are friends with each other that the parents will take turns. I'll take them home, tonight if you can pick them up tomorrow. You can think of things like that, like somehow getting families together.
Hmm.
So,
I could imagine that other people who work in the building, the social worker, special ed teacher, other therapists, administrators, when you help families problem solve to figure out how to help them coordinate some of those activities, we think, oh, well, I mean, it is our job to provide quality instruction and when kids are there, but when you have those after school clubs, we have all these other logistical things that families have to think about, which may impact their ability to participate. So helping them to utilize the supports they might have in their community would be, I think that would be an important factor as well. So like you said, they maybe could carpool or coordinate with other people in their support network to be able to help their kids access some of those school activities. And I know that that gets really tricky because with schools, it's like, where do you draw the line between
mhm,
what is an academically relevant intervention and what isn't? But
right.
so I know that that's kind of you're threading a fine needle there.
Yes.
But just even having an awareness that of why things might be happening can help, at least to help the families to navigate what resources they have available to them, and the
Exactly.
teachers as well, the staff as well, because I know a lot of people feel like they don't have good curricular materials, good therapy materials, or things to send home to the families. So knowing where you can go to get books can be a huge
Mhm.
piece of that.
Exactly. And I always tell teachers, we have quite a few new teachers starting this year. I've already sent them emails and saying, my room is your room. If you need
Hmm.
resources, if you need activities, if you need my help with anything, just come to see me. Like you said before, I'm always thrilled when people come and ask for help.
Yeah, it's a
It
huge
just,
compliment. And I don't know if everyone always thinks of it that way. It's like, oh no,
right,
something else. Like
right,
it can be overwhelming too, because it's like, oh my gosh,
right.
everyone's
But
asking something of me, but really it's a compliment.
yeah, it is. And I don't know, I get excited. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm geeky that way, but I'm like, oh my God, he
Mhm.
asked me for help. Yay.
I was
Like
always
doing that.
thrilled when when teachers would come to me for a language, literacy, spelling, or if
Mhm.
what would even be even more exciting was, oh, well, my student we're working on this math problem and they weren't able to problem solve and understand the vocabulary. And that's a really exciting moment when people realize that you are a resource for something relating to vocabulary that
Mhm.
isn't, I mean, I think people know that you need vocabulary to do math, but the
Right,
correlation between language and literacy is a little more obvious than when you think about math, but
right,
it's
right.
still there. So,
Right. Oh, I know. Like in my room, I have tubs of books related to math and science and art and, teaching language skills. I've got so much. You should come to my room. Like,
yeah, I'm sure you have so many great resources. So, well, we're going to link to all of the things that you mentioned. So all of
okay.
the places that people can go to learn more about getting access to books and being able to help distribute them, to
Mhm,
get them for themselves, for when they're working directly with students, to maybe share them with their colleagues, or maybe to share them with the kids and the families as well. So we'll link to all those, including Reading is Fundamental, which is our partner for this national literacy campaign, as well as some of
mhm,
the other great resources that you mentioned. Is there
mhm.
anything else you want to share, or any places people can go to connect with you, or parting words of wisdom?
I think I've hit everything. Like I said, make friends with your library. Go, go,
Hmm.
go, go there. Oh, I do have to say one more thing because I just thought this was the coolest. Reading is Fundamental had asked me to find a student this year, and her name is Chloe. Her voice is in all of the Macy's headphones as we speak,
Oh, wow.
talking about rounding up, their sales to donate to Reading is Fundamental. So I'm like so proud of her that her voice
That's
is
cool.
in all the Macy's stores right now.
Wow.
That was pretty, but I mean, just take advantage of anything. When I got the email from Reading is Fundamental, I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. I'm not going to kid you. If you get the grant, it is a lot of work, but
Hmm.
the benefits to get those books just outweighs any amount of work that I do for them because it's just grown into so many wonderful things and opportunities for my kids.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Karen. I really enjoyed our chat. The time just flew by.
It
So,
did, didn't it? Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check the show notes for all of the links that were mentioned in this episode and where you can go to connect with our amazing guest. In this episode, I mentioned the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers develop a strategic plan for putting executive functioning support in place in collaboration with their school teams. You can learn more about that program at drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. And I also mentioned Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, my program that helps SLPs create a system for language therapy. You can learn more about that program at drkarenspeech.com/language therapy. You can get 25% off either the School of Clinical Leadership or Language Therapy Advanced Foundations as part of the Reading as Fundamental series when you join either program, or actually you could join both programs if you want to, between September 15th and October 15th. All you need to do to get 25% off of either program or both programs is enter coupon code RIF25 on the checkout page when you sign up. Here's what you can do right now to support the Reading is Fundamental campaign and this special series that we're doing on de facto leaders. First, you can go to Apple or Spotify or any other directory you use for podcasts and subscribe to the De facto Leaders podcast. Once you listen to an episode or two, leave me a rating and review because that helps get my show into the hands of people who need the information. Finally, if you have a colleague or friend who needs to learn more about the research surrounding language and literacy, or you want to spread the word about practices and ideas you'd like to see in your school, community, or state, then tell them about De facto Leaders so they can listen to all of the episodes in this special series. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.